and we have to really escalate the noise we make so that we'll be heard.
Welcome to Gay USA. I'm Andy Hum, and I'm back with
the returning Ann Northrup.
We have a lot to talk about.
Well, first I want to talk about the wonderful notes we've been receiving from viewers. There was a particularly large trove of poignant notes this week of people thanking us and encouraging us to keep going in the face of what I like to call the impending apocalypse.
It ain't easy, but thank you.
We really appreciate that. And I also want to note that we don't often say how much we appreciate those who are monthly donors. I write notes to people who make one-time donations to us, either by credit card or check, but I don't keep regularly in touch with the monthly donors, but don't think I don't see your monthly donations and appreciate them. So
we do appreciate them. You know, we don't know most of you other than from the notes that you send us.
Don't say that. They all write us telling us they know us very well and we know them, and I think that's true. So,
well,
particularly at this time of year, it is quite poignant to know that you're out there and cheering us on.
And if you're still interested in making an end of the year tax-deductible donation, go to our website at gayusatv.org. And let's get to the news. Well, an appeals court this week upheld protections for LGBTQ people in the Affordable Care Act.
Yeah, it's, these people come out of right field trying to attack us on every level, everything that has been done nice for us or fairly for us, and they just say, we don't like it, so they go to court. Almost like Trump against the news media. More on that later. And the court said, people...
We're going to go do the headlines first, though, yes?
I am definitely out of practice. I apologize.
It's all right.
Whatever. Two pro-trans rulings out of Montana courts.
Montana!
Hey, I have friends in Montana.
And much more about Trump's out-gay pick for Treasury Secretary.
And then there's RFK Jr. He and Trump are poised to bring back polio despite their evasions and lies.
Trump's pick for Defense Secretary was 100 opposed to gays in the military. This is recent. This is like last month.
100%.
And is now trying to backtrack.
Ominously, this is what I started to refer to, ABC has settled a defamation suit brought against them by Trump. It has much more to do with Disney, by the way.
It's not going to stop us here at Gay USA.
Go ahead, sue us.
The anti-trans Republican Nancy Mace in the Congress there claims she was assaulted by a pro-trans man. Her account is disputed.
It's interesting that she called him a pro-trans man rather than making assumptions about who he was. Out Senator Tammy Baldwin is leading the fight to scuttle the anti-LGBTQ amendments in the defense bill. I have to say we're not optimistic, but they're voting today. Who knows?
There's a last-ditch effort to get President Biden to certify ratification of the Equal Rights Amendment.
I'm not optimistic about that either. Maybe you are.
Flip a coin.
I don't think our chances are that good. Pioneering gay news publisher Troy Masters has died at age 63.
Saudi Arabia's dismal human rights record was ignored as they were awarded the 2034 World Cup.
And perhaps every other sporting event in the future. Tom Viola's 36 years of leadership at Broadway Cares Equity Fights AIDS was celebrated with a big extravaganza this week.
That was a wonderful reception.
Yeah.
So we start with this appeals court decision from the notoriously conservative Fifth Circuit down there, in Texas and everything. They upheld provisions in the ACA protecting LGBTQ patients, A district court had ruled that the ACA doesn't ban discrimination based on sexual orientation and gender identity, only on sex assigned at birth. That's typical of the Fifth Circuit. But the appeals court vacated that decision based on the plaintiff's lack of standing in the case.
Yeah, and this, as I started to say inappropriately in the headline section, this is a common occurrence. The right wing finds any little thing they don't like, any law that supports us, any practice, any whatever, and they go into court and they say no. And then the court says, wait a minute, who are you? You don't have a dog in this fight. And they say, well, of course we do. We are Americans and we get to decide everything. And
we pay taxes.
And the court says, no, go away. So that's where we are on this one. That doesn't mean they're going to give up. They could still go to the Supreme Court.
Okay. Then a Montana court, granted a preliminary injunction preventing the state from barring trans people from obtaining accurate sex designations on their birth certificates and their driver's licenses. The court concluded that discriminating based on transgender status is sex discrimination and also violates the Equal Protection Clause. It was an ACLU case.
And they also, in another case...
Well, this is the High Court. This was a district court, then the High Court.
Yes, the
Montana
Supreme Court upheld for the moment or stopped the implementation of an anti-trans care bill. That's in ongoing litigation, and the Supreme Court says, no, we are not halting that case, that bill, while it is being litigated, or we are halting it. And wake up. We are halting it because this law against care for trans people cannot go into effect until that litigation is settled.
And, we're arguing that it's unconstitutional under the state constitution's privacy clause that prohibits government intrusion on private medical decisions. It's another ACLU case. Because at the federal level, justices like Clarence Thomas recognize no right to privacy except when it comes to his corrupt financial dealings. So the outcome of the challenge to Tennessee's anti-trans case may be different, though some still hold out hope for Gorsuch, and who did not speak at the hearings.
Shannon Minter of National Center for Lesbian Rights.
And Amy Coney Barrett, yes. Yeah. Shannon being a transgender legal leader.
Yes. And I buy his reasoning. I think it's possible that the court could go our way on this. But mostly what I want to say is, you've expressed the usual astonishment that Montana would have good court decisions, but we have Zoe Zephyr there, and she is a personal example every day in the news as a living, breathing trans person to show people what the implications of these kinds of laws are. And congratulations to Zoe, who married her partner, Aaron Reed. They are now like the flood of people getting married before the Republicans take power.
Of course, she was silenced by the legislature when she spoke up, and I think she went to court over that and didn't even win.
But she's back there now.
She is now because she won a new term.
Yeah.
And then there's the Federal Appeals Court in Louisiana. They ruled that the NASDAQ, the stock exchange DEI initiative, which was to boost the number of women, racial minorities, and LGBTQ people on corporate boards, was unconstitutional. The initiative was approved by the SEC, the Securities and Exchange Commission, back in 2021. NASDAQ has no plans to appeal.
Yeah, this is very depressing, all this DEI stuff. We're really going backwards, lickety-split on this.
Although, as I would point out, yes, there are like 10 or 15 even companies that say, we're not going to do that anymore. And some universities are having to pull back on it based on court decisions. But the Human Rights Campaign still has 1,300 corporations cooperating with its with its corporate
and there
equality
are plenty
index.
of people, plenty of LGBTQ plus people in these corporations and universities and everywhere else who are fighting for fair treatment, so that's not going to stop. But still, it's discouraging. They're all these, not all, but there is a trend, I think, an accelerating trend to disempower these resolutions. And it includes You know, it's not just about sexual orientation or gender, it's about race.
Yes.
This supposed critical race theory.
And women.
It's straight white men fighting back for their place.
Yes. Well,
Like all the Republican leaders of committees are straight white men.
well, we got a gay white man that Trump wants to be Treasury Secretary.
Wait, I have to add a thought before I forget it. The Democrats are lining up there. We talk. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez lost her bid to be the leading Democrat on the House Oversight Committee.
To Jerry Connolly of Virginia.
And the New York Times wrote a very inflammatory headline that was inappropriate, you know, pushback to Ocasio-Cortez. And then in the body of the story, the Democrats are all saying, we love her, she's going to assume leadership roles, she just needs a little more time. She's terrific. She's one of our favorites. And the headline has said, you know, like the end of Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. But at the same time, Angie Craig, representative from Minnesota, out lesbian, is going to be the leading Democrat on the House Agriculture Committee.
So there.
Yes. Sorry to interrupt.
All right. So not straight, but white. Gay Scott Bessent is Trump's nominee, 62, for the Treasury Secretary. He's a hedge fund manager. He was once a reliable Democratic supporter. That's him on the left there with his husband.
John Freeman.
Yeah. He was classmates while at Yale with Steve Mnuchin, who was Trump's first Treasury Secretary, and they worked together on the college newspaper. His family connections in South Carolina go back to 1672. I'm getting this from a New York Times profile, so take it for what it's worth. His father's bankruption, you know, when he went bankrupt, that drove him to start working at age 9, setting up beach chairs, and made him advocate for teaching financial literacy. So far, so good. He was close to Blaine Trump, Donald's former sister-in-law, and they together sat on the board of God's Love We Deliver.
I was going to say, she was a great AIDS activist and supporter.
Which delivers hot meals to people with AIDS and now to others who are homebound. He has supported the Elton John AIDS Foundation and the Empire State Pride Agenda, which was the gay lobby in New York. So even HRC is encouraged, though the proof will be if he becomes a voice for LGBTQ people in that highly anti-gay cabinet.
And how much power will that voice have?
His kids are being schooled in London. I guess they're going to move back, where he is pals with the king. I mean, they get together all the time.
I know. Why is any of this important?
Well, his husband, John Freeman, they were married in 2011 as a former assistant district attorney in the Bronx. His late sister was a public defender. He once sued a former partner, Will Trinkle. That name sounds familiar.
I know Will Trinkle.
Yes, for over a $2 million loan. But in campaigning for Trump, he predicted a Kamala crash, which may be underway already and could be accelerating if Trump's numbskull economic plans are put into place. Trump, who recently called Prince William a handsome guy, said Bessent was a nice-looking guy out of central casting. Now, Trump says this a lot about boys.
He says it about everybody. That's how he literally casts his cabinet.
I think he's got an eye for the boys. I'm not trying to say anything, and we don't want him.
Well, his actions are not helpful.
All right, let's talk about Pete Hegseth.
Okay. Well, he's got many opinions that are surfacing from his old life. He talked about gays in the military as Marxists who are destroying the military.
It's a shift from the tough-looking go-get-'em army.
Oh, yeah?
The absurdity of I have two mommies. And I'm so proud to show them that I can wear a uniform, too.
The ignorance of these people knows no bounds.
This was said like a month ago.
Well, now He's a lot more progressive.
Well, come on. You gotta
I
be
say
kidding.
that sarcastically.
All right. By the way, 6% of the current military is estimated, personnel is estimated to be LGBTQ. That's 126,827 people. And Trump promised to ban trans people in the military. That's going to get rid of 10,000 people.
Well, it's going to be very interesting to see if anybody follows through on any of this, and it's going to be really interesting to see Hegseth before a Senate committee. Please, Democrats, do not hold back in your questioning.
Well, yes. I mean, when he was asked by reporters, should gays serve in the military, he said, yes. That's it.
Well, that was his walk back.
That's it.
Yeah.
It's not an explanation.
Yeah, but I mean, he didn't say that voluntarily. He said it after all his bad stuff surfaced and he was being accused of being a monster.
He says his comments on women in combat, again, said a month ago, women should never serve in combat. It's terrible. They were very clear. He says they were misconstrued. He says now women are some of the greatest, our greatest warriors. And that's not the same thing as saying women should serve in combat.
Exactly.
He promised to stop drinking if confirmed, so I guess he'll only start AA meetings then. And it ain't easy. It requires a lot of humility, which he has very little of.
He's not going to AA meetings. He doesn't have the character to go to AA meetings. You have to actually want to stop drinking to go to AA meetings.
Well, he wants to be Secretary of Defense.
Well, ask him if he stopped drinking yet.
Then there's Kari Lake. The hard-right former TV reporter and former friend to drag queens. She was, but she turned on us. She lost for governor. She lost for U.S. Senate in Arizona. And she's Trump's pick for the Voice of America, which she wants to make into just a chronicler of America's achievements instead of a credible outlet that it was designed to be, news outlet. But people in Arizona are thrilled that she might be leaving.
Yes, I was going to say that. They said it for me.
Especially Republicans.
Look, the Voice of America.
The
Voice of America has a very good reputation for being truth tellers about the good and the bad of America and just reporting what's going on here. And all that is going to disappear if Kari Lake has her way, and it's just shameful.
They do have a board that was created to try to insulate that a bit. Well, so we'll see what will happen there.
Since when did
Trump
people pay any attention to...
Well, he already had one term, and he didn't get to do all he wanted to do to the Voice of America.
And he's learned his lesson.
Yes, on everything.
Yeah.
For those of you who say, well, did it go so horribly the last time? Well, of course, we lost, the right to choose and abortion and everything, and a lot of other things. But
3 Supreme Court seats.
And but he is determined not to make the same mistakes again when it comes to getting us.
So he's sending Herschel Walker as the ambassador to the Bahamas. Sorry, Bahamas.
Well, and then Kimberly Guilfoyle to Greece.
To Greece. That's one way to get rid of your son's
Dad, can you get rid of this woman?
Ambassador to Greece. Really something.
She broke up with
all right.
Don Jr.
All right. So Bobby Kennedy Jr.
Yes.
We've heard about this thing about all the vaccines, the polio vaccine, raw milk, all his crazy stuff. But I find interesting his statements about HIV and AIDS in past years. No proof that HIV causes AIDS. He's an HIV denier.
Caused by poppers, he used to say.
Well, he wasn't the only one who said that. Lifestyle.
We said it for 5 seconds when we didn't know what was killing us.
No, I'm not blaming us.
I'm
saying there's a whole faction of people who said that, and he bought into it. Lifestyle factors, compulsive homosexual behavior. Really? Could you explain how all those straight women have died, and straight men for that matter?
And of course, he's a tomcat himself.
Of course.
All right. So anyway.
Again, looking forward to the Senate hearing.
No. Who has been vetting all the candidates for people to work in HHS? Aaron Seary. This guy, special. There's a picture of him with Bobby. Specializes in lawsuits challenging vaccine requirements. He's asked the FDA to revoke approval of the polio vaccine against a disease that was all but eradicated and is now posed for comeback. Now, both RFK and Trump said this week they're not against polio vaccines, but that's not the same thing as making them mandatory, which you need to do if you're going to contain another epidemic.
RFK's line on this is more people died from taking the polio vaccine than were saved from polio, because the polio vaccine, according to him, causes cancer.
Yeah. Siri also wants to suspend this guy Siri, who's very involved with hiring everybody for the HHS.
Not to be confused with the voice.
Right. He wants to suspend FDA approval of the hepatitis B vaccine, developed in the early 1980s with a test group of gay men, including me. And one of the things he said was, well, the reason it shouldn't have been approved is because it was not a controlled experiment. Yes, it was. I got the placebo, and then eventually was given the vaccine. So it's a lie. We're around here to testify to this. Falling vaccination rates due to skepticism have already led to a rise in measles and whooping cough in the United States. Thank you, RFK Jr. The inventor of the rubella vaccine, Dr. Stanley Plotkin, said having this guy Siri in a position of influence would be a disaster, laughable in many ways, except that he's a danger to public health.
Exactly. This is what's coming down the pike. And I hear people say, well, I'm just going to take a wait and see stance. I'm not going to go around raising alarms. I'm going to wait and see what actually happens before I condemn them.
And smart people are stockpiling drugs.
And getting married.
Yes.
All right. Rick Grinnell, you want to go too?
All right. Yeah, sure. Trump found a job for the right-wing gay tech billionaire Richard Grinnell, who's been lobbying to be Secretary of State, but he lost out to Marco Rubio. He wants him as his envoy for special missions, a vague title in a position that may not require Senate confirmation that would subject him to scrutiny for his work for clients such as Iran. And
Trump wants him to go to hot spots around the world.
He helped Melania get paid hundreds of thousands of dollars for speeches, inclling to the
Well, it was just two
Republicans.
speeches, one to the log cabin Republicans and one other that I can't remember.
Hundreds of $500,000 we're talking about.
Two speeches.
All right.
$250 each.
Yeah, well, and in 2020, he flew to Las Vegas after Trump lost to file false accusations of fraud that he knew were wrong, but of course were dismissed.
Oh, that was very much like Bush v. Gore.
They won.
Yeah, I know. Rick Grinnell couldn't even do that.
Right.
Yeah.
All right. In Trump's Time interview, he would not answer a question on whether people should be able to use restrooms of their choosing. Oh, I don't want to get into the bathroom issue because it's a very small number of people that we're talking about, and it's ripped our country apart. Let's pick that apart. This is from the campaign that's spent tens of millions of dollars. 90% of their ads were anti-trans.
And that came up in the Time interview, and he just runs right over it. He will not address it, and the journalists do not hold him to account for that.
And by the way,
they just let him stonewall them, like I'm doing to you right now.
And by the way,
yes,
he's asked about bringing prices down. Oh, that's very difficult. This is of course his biggest promise, and for most of the
groceries
people, I will just call them people who voted for him, they're still saying things like, oh, he's disgusting. But, things were cheaper, And seriously, this was in the paper this week. This is what they're saying. And
it was 8 years ago, and there was a pandemic in between.
Yeah. So now he admits it can't be done. And by the way, in terms of the bathroom issue, that was a big issue in Odessa, Texas. We told you about that, where Odessa, Texas went above and beyond. They said you can get a $10,000 bounty on trans people who use the restroom that's not aligned with their birth sex. And so 3 council members there who supported this lost.
They were very right-wing council members who had just recently won election to the city council, and the town said, wait a minute, this is not what we had in mind, and they got voted out. And one of the people who got voted in was an out gay man, Craig Stoker, who is a hell of a hero. He got 56% of the vote in his race, and he is someone who tried to do sort of mainstream jobs, and he just couldn't connect with anything. And he ended up going to work for Meals on Wheels. And he is a huge hero in the community for doing this kind of work and doing outreach to everybody all over the place.
Right.
And he was elected to the city council, which has now flipped in Odessa, Texas, and gotten rid of the bad bathroom bill.
Things can change.
Yes.
Trump also appointed gay tech executive Jacob Hellberg as Under-Secretary of State for Economic Growth and Energy. He's a former Pete Buttigieg supporter who went over to the dark side.
Now, we also have ABC paying $15 million to the Trump Library to make up for the horror of the George Stephanopoulos defamatory interview.
So George had Nancy Mace on, and he kept saying, because she was a victim of sexual abuse herself, right? Mm-hmm. And said, how can you support someone who was, convicted of rape? And he kept repeating that. And Trump said, I didn't rape anybody, but of course it was sexual assault. He was convicted of sexual assault.
And the judge says, look, it's just an anomaly of the law that we don't call this rape, but of course it was.
When you grab someone in a room and you stick your finger in their private parts, that is rape.
Non-consensually.
Yes.
So a lot of people are upset.
Non-consensually.
A lot of people are upset that ABC just rolled over and paid this $15 million. But it really has to do with the Disney company and ABC News staying in the good graces of Trump and not putting themselves into a prolonged process that would be very expensive. And
that they were sure to win.
I certainly think so. But also what confuses me is everybody now is so scared of these lawsuits from Trump, and he's now suing the Des Moines Register because of their bad poll.
That said he was going to lose Iowa.
Yes, and he didn't lose Iowa by any stretch of the imagination.
And he's going after CBS, 60
Minutes. He's going after everybody.
Because they edited the interview with Harris. I mean, this is kind of stuff. Well, wait a minute. This is extremely threatening because
But why is no one suing him for his lies?
Well,
why is no one suing him for his lies?
I don't know, but
he has had a terrible effect on any number of people and companies and everything else, and no one is suing him for that.
Go get him. But he is now, if you must realize, he is now surrounded by these oligarchs, deep-pocketed oligarchs who got him elected. I mean, with their money in these campaigns. And they are going to fund these lawsuits relentlessly against the people they hate. This is how Rick Grinnell did to...
yes, I know who you mean. Yes. Look it up. But put him on the defensive, for heaven's sake. Of course, that's what he's so mad about, that we did put him on the defensive in the Stormy Daniels case and the misvaluing his holdings case and a few others. Oh, the Mar-a-Lago documents case. And he's so angry about all that that's why he's doing all of this. But, we won several of those cases, and those verdicts are going to stand. And I really cannot fathom why we're not doing more of that. So there. All right, back to a little Defense Department stuff. Well, first of all, Hegseth, the Defense Department nominee, went to the Army-Navy game with Trump, as did the New York City subway killer Daniel Penny, recently. Penny, sorry.
Yes.
Recently acquitted.
Yes. The guy who killed the homeless black schizophrenic man on the subway. Now, look. The guy was trying to do something good and contain someone who was being aggressive. And I know, of course, lots of people I don't know lots of people. It is brave to do that, to take on some of these people. But he obviously held him long after the guy was completely subdued and out of it. And that's what killed him. Yeah. But a jury found that he was not guilty of manslaughter. But this is Trump elevating. It's a whole race thing too. It's just
vigilante justice.
He's a hero to the right.
Meanwhile, the Congress is still working on this Defense Department authorization bill for their budget. And last week we told you the House passed. By the way, last week, Maren Johns, you and Maren did a fantastic show
Ann.
last week.
Thank you,
really,
Maren.
I was very impressed. And thank you, Maren, for filling in for 2 weeks for me. But the Defense Department bill passed the House, even with these anti-trans amendments saying that military members could not get military medical care for their trans kids.
Right.
And so now the fight moves to the Senate.
And she only got like 20 votes on an amendment to get rid of that. But
Tammy Baldwin.
Tammy Baldwin. And what were the other? I mean, what about the anti-abortion amendments and all those kinds of things?
I think all the bad amendments are still in there. There's a DEI and critical race theory amendment in there too. And the Senate is supposed to do a vote on the bill, final vote today. So obviously we don't have that result yet, but you will by the time you see this. And then assuming it passes, which I have to say I assume it will, 81 Democrats in the House voted for it, including gay Democrats.
Chris Pappas.
Yeah.
From New Hampshire, who has been, totally pro-gay and everything like that.
Yes.
But,
Well, they're all talking about how necessary it is to pass this bill for the Defense Department.
Well, it is a must-pass bill, but I expected better from the Senate in terms of getting rid of these bad amendments.
So Biden's the last line of defense. If it passes the Senate, he could veto it, but it passed by such overwhelming numbers in the House and probably the Senate.
And Mike Johnson, you only got a one-vote majority going into the new year.
That could topple immediately.
All right, Nancy Mace.
What a gal.
She's, of course, been on an anti-trans crusade. And try to remember, this was a woman who was relatively pro-gay and relatively decent because she lived in a swing district. They changed the district. Nancy changed.
Now it's a sling district.
There she is with her sling. So she claims she was physically accosted by a guy she called a pro-trans man. There at the Capitol, she was at a hearing, who approached her to talk to her, extended his hand. She said James McIntyre, 33, shook her hand so hard she ended up with her arm in a sling. Now, Elliot Hinkle, who's an advocate for LGBTQ, witnessed the interaction and said no such thing happened, said McIntyre just said trans youth are also foster youth, and she heads the foster youth committee, and need your support. But he was arrested by Capitol Police. He has pleaded not guilty.
Really, really, really.
It's grotesque.
It is grotesque. I'll add a little point of light. At the Supreme Court hearing on the Tennessee anti-trans bill, one of the people who showed up was Annette Bening outside to speak. Right. She has a trans child, and she's very vociferous in her support of the trans community.
With Warren Beatty.
Of course. And it was nice to see pictures of her out there on the Supreme Court steps.
That's great.
Upholding trans people.
I hope she caught their eye and that they like her movies. Well, I mean, this is how the court decides things sometimes.
Yeah, it's just hard to imagine Clarence Thomas and Samuel Alito.
If Jackie Kennedy had not supported the Conservancy law, historic preservation, save Grand Central Terminal, that law would not have been upheld by the United States Supreme Court.
And there would not be a Grand Central
Terminal.
Thank you.
All right. Now, U.S. Senator Kirsten Gillibrand is trying to lead 46 senators, pressuring Biden. There she is with him at the Stonewall, actually.
Yeah.
And trying to pressure him to just send a note to the Archivist of the United States that the Equal Rights Amendment has enough ratifications from 38 states to be part of the Constitution, and we'll have done with it. So now, the
problem is that people say that it's too late, that the final states to pass the amendment didn't pass the deadline.
Right. There was a deadline. We had a extension march, and we got an extension of about 7 years, I think, and we didn't get it then. But eventually we did in 2020 when Virginia ratified. Now, since then, some states have tried to rescind their endorsements. Now, of course, Democrats are fearful of a state-generated U.S. Constitutional Convention, which many states have called for. Many states over the years have called for a Constitutional Convention. Now we're afraid of it. And so
I've always been afraid of it.
Well, you can be afraid, except that they are always going to need 3/4 of the states to ratify anything that they come up with.
These days, I'm afraid of it.
It's a little close.
Yeah.
I did the math.
Stay away.
No, it's close.
Stay away.
If you look at, well, we haven't had a convention since 1789.
Nor should we.
Well, I mean, but the Constitution.
Not these days.
But the Constitution says you can have this if 2/3 of the
States
want. No, yes, 2/3 of the states have to want it, and we're close to that.
This way lies madness.
But I mean, even California called for one, like in the 1800s, and they're going to use that and say, well, that's.
I see. So perhaps we could use those votes over the years for the ERA.
All right. Texas. The Attorney General there, Ken Paxton, a very evil man. He's suing a New York doctor for making abortion pills, sending abortion pills to people in Texas where abortion is banned. New York also has a shield law, doctors from out of state, shielding doctors from out of state prosecution, as do 8 other states. It could end up in federal court, but anti-abortion zealots are trying to make abortion a crime nationwide. New York may countersue Texas. Texas will invoke the 151-year-old Comstock Act, and the current DOJ has ruled that pills could be sent through the mails if the recipient did not intend to use them unlawfully.
Well, but in Texas, would it be unlawful? Because Texas has an anti-abortion law, and that's where the rubber meets the road on this, because New York is arguing, and Governor Hochul is supporting this, that we do have a shield law, and doctors in New York cannot be prosecuted for attempting to assist in an abortion. But Texas could prosecute the woman.
If you can't get them from New York, try India. I mean, lots of, by the way.
You can get them, but the point is, what happened with this woman is that her partner found out that she was using them. She had not told him originally, and he turned her in. So if you don't have someone who's going to turn you in for it.
Is she being prosecuted already?
I don't think so yet, but Paxton's going after the doctor first. But if he fails in that, let's see.
They are relentless.
Exactly.
By the way,
Katie, bar the door.
By the way, California's governor's race is next year, and Gavin Newsom is term limited, and all eyes are on Kamala Harris. Is she going to run? But there are a whole bunch of declared candidates already, including Tori Atkins, who was the first female and first out LGBTQ leader of the California State Senate.
Yeah, she's a powerful person in California. All right, let's see what else we got here. In Warren County, Virginia, the supervisors there have taken control of the public library so that they can ban books. Local residents are fighting against this. But what's so interesting...
Republicans in North Carolina have taken control of all 3 branches of government so that the rest of them have no power than the legislature.
Aren't we suing over that?
I don't know if it's going to do any good.
Yeah.
Not with the Supreme Court that they've got now.
The LA Times in California says sales of LGBTQ books to schools are down because people are scared of things like this, local politicians shutting down.
I always want to remind our viewers, young and old, that many public libraries, including Brooklyn and New York Public Library, make all these banned books available online to you.
But it would be nice if your teacher could just hand you the book. In fact, in Oregon, a gay teacher, Eileen Brennick, has just won an award of $90,000. She was harassed for blowing the whistle on principal and staff and district superintendent who were racist and homophobic. They harassed. I don't know whether she was fired or suspended, but she's won a settlement of $90,000. Good for you for fighting back, Eileen. Thank you.
What about those Furies?
Well, also in an educational vein, Biden, one of his acts as he does his last month in office, he declared some national historic landmarks, and one of them is a house in D.C. that was the home of the Furies Collective, which was, pretty much radical lesbians. It was a feminist publishing group in the 1970s, and it is now a national landmark.
It only functioned that way from 71 till 73. It was dedicated to destroying sexism. It published the Furies magazine. After that short beginning, much like the Gay Liberation Front in New York, members continued to play outsized roles in gay and lesbian media, art, literature, feminism, and civil rights, including the feminist press, Diana Books, and Olivia Records, which later became Olivia Cruise Line.
So to speak.
Anyway.
Biden also declared a national landmark, the Stowe Burial House in D.C., which was the home of a black lesbian couple who were educators. Lucy Diggs Stowe taught at Howard University. They lived there from 1922 to 1937 as an out lesbian couple, and that is now a National Historic Landmark.
Terrific. Okay. All right. We lost a former editor of mine and publisher, Troy Masters. He was the founder of the gay newspapers LGNY and the Gay City News. He died at the age of 63, he apparently took his own life. He later founded the LA Blade. He was a native of Gallatin, Tennessee, graduated from the University of Tennessee at Knoxville, moved to New York City, joined the ad staff at Outweek in 1989, and then he launched QW Magazine, combined activism with journalism like most of the LGBTQ press, and he could be quite passionate about his causes. He stuck with LGBTQ journalism for decades, as few have, played a major role in getting attention to the Mpox outbreak in 2022 in LA, one that is not over, needless to say. The West Hollywood Council meeting was adjourned in his memory on Monday. Now, when QW folded after a couple of years because the founder, Bill Chaffin, died of AIDS, he was a record producer and ACT UP supporter, Masters felt kind of hopeless and depressed as the epidemic was still raging very heavily in those days. And he said a friend in Moscow, Masha Gessen, urged him to get off his back and get busy. And the New York's LGBTQ community was suffering an urgent health crisis, and he needed to fight back for our rights against a rise in anti-LGBTQ violence. So he put together LGNY out of his apartment in 1994 until 2002, when he and Paul Schindler launched Gay City News. He endured a lot of childhood trauma, including getting raped on an Amtrak train when he was 14 years old by a staff member. But so he had that kind of mix in him, but he was remembered, as extremely passionate. And I worked a long time for him.
Yes, as did I. We both wrote for all these publications, and I will certainly hold him up as someone who was dedicated to the LGBTQ press. Right.
Okay. And then there was Marvin Laird, who conducted shows he was a conductor, musical conductor, conducted shows on and off Broadway and worked with, we have another picture of him, with Bernadette Peters. He is survived by his husband, Joel Paley, who we met in 1976 during a rehearsal for a TV special with Shirley MacLaine. They collaborated on a successful Broadway musical in 1992 called Ruthless, and that won awards and has been performed all around the world. He was a native of Kansas City, Missouri. He worked such Broadway shows as Annie Get Your Gun and Gypsy. He wrote the music for lots of TV shows from Maude to The Love Boat. He met Ms. Peters when she was 13 in a New Jersey production of Gypsy. Wow. And they often worked over the years. The orchestras loved him, she said. Marvin could get the whole orchestra to breathe with him.
He had an amazing resume of all those productions. Yep. Incredible.
In Queens, the killer of trans woman Amanda Gonzalez Andujar has finally been sentenced for murder. It was after 15 years. Rasheen Everett was first convicted in 2013. He's there on the left. But that was overturned by a judge due to a judge's error. So Melinda Katz, the DA out there, retried him this fall. The jury took just 1 hour to find him guilty of the strangulation death as well as the burglary and tampering with evidence. So he was sentenced to 25 years to life. They never gave up on this case.
3 more men have filed suit against P. Diddy, accusing him of drugging their drinks and sexually assaulting them. There's a growing list of men as well as women who have accused him of sexual assault.
And he's still in custody.
In Oxford, Mississippi, a mistrial has been declared in the trial of Timothy Harrington, who for the murder of Gary Lee. Lee was a local drag performer. They evidently had a sexual encounter, but I don't think they ever found a body. And a mistrial has been declared.
Okay.
In Syracuse, New York, the judge who refused to marry the lesbian couple is now recused from all criminal cases while they investigate her.
Well, the DA asked that happened because he said you can't walk into her court not knowing that she's a bigot, basically, and how she's going to react.
And in New York...
And I hope they've stopped her from doing all marriages, because that's the rule. If you won't do gays, you can't do anyone.
I think so. Well, actually, I don't know that. And another judge in New York has approved a settlement in the class action case brought by a lesbian couple against Aetna Insurance for fertility treatment coverage, unequal coverage.
Okay. International news, or no? You got some more?
I just want to mention this horrible tragedy in Madison, Wisconsin, of the school shooting and the killing of students
at the Christian school in Madison.
Yes, and these rumors that the female shooter, 15 years old, the right wing is saying she's trans.
They always say that.
Well, yes, and the congressman from that district is out gay Mark Pocan, who's saying, look, these guys are idiots. They've got to shut up about this.
I mean, there's not even any evidence that the manifesto that she wrote apparently was something somebody wrote to her, so we don't know. All right.
We don't know.
International news?
And maybe she was and maybe she wasn't.
Right.
But really, what all these cases are about is bullying. And we have to, it's about the guns and it's about bullying. And we have to focus on these.
And, kids, if you see somebody being bullied, first of all, stand up for them, but also, this kind of stuff needs to get reported. I understand the kids themselves who are getting bullied are reluctant to report because of the trouble they're going to go through.
Well, they do report and nothing is done.
Well,
there's this kid, this 10-year-old who took his life, who his parents are now suing the school because everybody reported it 20 times and the school did nothing. So the child is dead and the parents are suing.
Okay. International news.
Yes.
So Ghana passed this horrible anti-gay law in February. The president of the country said, let's see what the Supreme Court thinks about it. So they just said, we can't stop this because because you haven't signed it yet, and then we could rule on it. So it's now in his court.
Yes, the president. In Saudi Arabia, the country has now been awarded the 2034 FIFA World Cup competition, which lasts for about a month.
Even though they don't meet FIFA's own human rights requirements, according to Amnesty International, there are no LGBT groups there, LGBTQ
well,
groups
they kill gay people.
Same-sex acts are punishable by death. The Saudi tourist site says, we ask visitors to respect our culture and traditions and follow our laws as they would any country. Visitors are not required to disclose their personal information. So we'll see how rainbow insignia go down on the field. It did not go well in Qatar.
They're already being taken out of British football or soccer, the rainbow insignia. It's another DEI retreat. But Saudi Arabia says we don't engage in sports washing.
By the way, I admit I don't know entirely how credible this is, but there was a report that the King of England or of UK hosted the Emir of Qatar, who he was given a state dinner. Apparently, he got into a fight in a gay club
20 years ago.
2005, and a gay club, and they barred him for life from coming back to heaven, which is the name of the club. And he immediately got married to his first wife shortly thereafter, to a second in 2009, and to a third in 2014. He has, and you don't have to divorce any of them; you just keep them. 13 kids.
Okay, I guess you're straight.
I don't know which wife got to go to the state dinner.
Maybe all of them.
All right.
In the UK, they have banned puberty blockers unless you're in a study. They have actually put that into effect.
Yes, this was done by the out-gay health secretary, a guy named Wes Streeting, and who said, I'm gay and I try to reach out to them and understand. No, you don't. I mean, you just ban the whole thing. It's terrible.
So there was a camp out of trans youth protesting this, a nice little demonstration. There they are camping out. It's just really tough out there.
In Japan, a third Japanese court says that the country's ban on same-sex marriage is unconstitutional, violating the right to pursue happiness, though it dismissed claims of plaintiffs for compensation. So more high courts in Japan are going to have to rule this way before the Supreme Court can let any of this go into effect.
Well, the UK has increased compensation for LGBT people thrown out of the military unfairly, as opposed to those thrown out fairly. So the compensation has risen from £12,500 to £70,000.
Well, that is progress, and I think that movie that we had the filmmaker on, Rosemary Reed, with Peter Tatchell, which was about all these people who were their lives were totally upended by these laws. Okay. They found you with a gay magazine, they threw you out, and you couldn't get a job after that.
All right. Well, big event in New York this week as we move to AIDS news. Tom Viola, after 35 years at the helm,
36,
excuse me, retiring from Broadway Cares Equity Fights AIDS.
Yes. He was praised not just for the millions that they raised to help people with HIV/AIDS in the depths of the plague, and for women's health and for other people in crisis, but for actively knitting together Broadway into a caring community. He was praised as profoundly compassionate, but also for his sense of humor and being able to see what needed to be done and to do it. Jonathan Groff got up and said, I was 19, working at a restaurant in Chelsea, serving tables, and Tom was at this table and says, you seem like you're an actor, right? He could pick that up. He says, why don't you come volunteer for our Red Bucket thing? You get to see the last act of Broadway plays. And it got Jonathan to start his career. 2 years later, Jonathan's on Broadway in Spring Awakening, for God's sakes. Now, his successor, Danny Whitman, said Tom was able to expand the mission of Broadway Cares beyond AIDS without ever diminishing the commitment to people with AIDS. And then Tom got up and he said, he says, I always carry around this thing in my pocket. It was given to me by a therapist. Begin where you are. Do what you can with grace, move forward with faith, and most importantly, ask for help. And that's kind of the way Tom has operated all these years, saving lives, lifting people out of despair. He said we had some good times as well. But the final thing he said, and he got a huge round of applause, together we can prove that decency is not weakness.
And he is one of the most decent men on the planet. And we're going to have the privilege and joy of having an extended conversation with him that we're taping shortly, that we will show you New Year's weekend. We are doing that as a special program, along with an interview with our associate producer, Bill Ballman, who also has a great long history in the movement. And that will be our special end-of-the-year show.
And he also quoted Andre DeShields at the end, who said, "Generosity and gratitude are the fuel of the universe." That's a nice thought. Andre, by the way, and they're bringing the entire original cast of Hadestown, which Andre led and won the Tony Award for, back to the Lyric Theatre. It's in London, of course, February 11th to March 9th if you're going over. I saw that production at the National Theatre. It's quite wonderful, and of course in Broadway. So Andre DeShields and crew, Patrick Page, everybody else.
Okay. In other entertainment news, Pixar, a Disney project, division, whatever, has a new cartoon movie coming out, streaming in February, called Win or Lose, the story of a middle school co-ed softball team. But and in episodes, it goes player by player for their story leading up to the championship game. But one of the characters was supposed to be trans, but her lines about being trans have been excised.
She's
from
still
this
in it,
movie.
but they don't identify her.
Right.
Boy, cowards over there at Disney.
Exactly.
All the way.
But I was happy to see that one of the big movies at Sundance, a documentary on Chase Strangio, was being made by our old pal here at Manhattan Neighborhood Network, Sam Feder.
Oh, wow.
Yes, so that's something to look forward to.
And, the short list for the best documentary at the Oscars is out. One of them is Will and Harper, the road movie about Will Ferrell and his trans friend, SNL writer Harper Steele. And Emilia Perez is on the short list for Best International Feature from France, even because it's got a French director, though mostly in Spanish, and set in Mexico.
And up for a lot of Golden Globes. But as I said a few weeks ago, I finally watched Will and Harper and thought it was really good and really worth watching, and not so conventional, not so predictable as I would have thought. I think everything's going to be predictable, but this surprised me, and I like that.
That's what we like. We like to be surprised.
Yes.
We hope we're not surprising you too much, but we try to give you all the information that we can.
Well, I've made a few little wrong turns today that surprised me.
You're getting back. You're getting,
I just moved, and it is hell. It is hell. But people sending checks in have found me because my new address is on the website. I've moved from the west side to the east side. It's culture shock.
We miss you at London Terrace.
I miss all of you. That's the hardest part about
Come
moving.
back anytime. You have a key at my place.
I do. I still have your key. All right.
So you can use my printer if you need to.
So we will be back next week at Christmas time. We're taping a day or two early because of schedules with the various facilities, but we'll see you next week.
Thanks for watching.
Yeah.
And great to have you back, Ann.
Thanks.
And thank you again, Marin.